The game followed by the Big Ten championship game, Ohio State, Wisconsin. We bring in Claire Crawford from theozone.net. You got to jump online, go to the site, not right now, afterwards. Go to the site and look up her podcast with Joe Dexter. Oh, hell no. Claire, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing so well. The Buckeyes beat that team up north. I'm rolling towards a Big Ten championship game. I'm super excited.
Yeah, we can't let last week's game go. We typically do a preview more so than a review of the previous game, but it's the game. And 31-20 Ohio State after falling behind 14-0. Your impressions of the outcome, obviously good. Early on, not so good. Did you maintain the faith? How nervous were you?
I wasn't necessarily nervous because of the fact that we have seen this Ohio State team come back from a bigger margin than that. We saw specifically in the Penn State game them come back from an 18-point deficit. And it was something that in a rivalry game, I wouldn't say that there's not a part of me that was like, oh, okay, well, this feels like Iowa, because Ohio State's offense wasn't getting anything done in the first quarter. They had negative yards. Michigan defense looked very staunch. The Buckeyes didn't see anything out of Michigan, and us fans didn't see anything out of Michigan than we didn't see all year. We saw the same Michigan that we had expected, and the Buckeyes still weren't getting it done. So offensively, I was more curious to see how they would adjust to what Michigan was giving them.
Yeah, Claire, and you're not going to like me for saying this because I don't know how you feel about jinxes, but that team up north is going to win some year, whatever year that's going to be in. We'll let time fill in the blank, but they're going to win at some point. So being down 14-0, I think there were a number of stats passed on during the broadcast alluding to when has that type of deficit been overcome in this game. And it's been a long, long time, if ever, I believe, that Ohio State in particular has overcome this kind of deficit. And just the history that I think is a little overblown because in rivalry games, we have seen the lesser team upset the team that was playing for a championship or playing for a big bowl bid. And thus was the case this year. Of course, Michigan having a decent season, but out of the championship race, and Ohio State trying to still get to the college football playoff. Could have lost the game and still gone to the game in Indianapolis for the Big Ten, but out of the college football playoff. And just the history of the underdog winning, you would have to go back several years to dive into that history, but we certainly did last week. But that it's going to happen, because if you think about this streak in which Ohio State has lost just once since 2003, it's quite an astounding streak. On the surface, you would think, okay, it's a great streak, but Ohio State has been the more dominant program, and they have been, and Michigan's been down. That's a little overstated. Michigan's been down basically from about 2008 to a few years ago, and they actually did have a good Sugar Bowl season in there, the one year that they beat Luke Fickell and Ohio State in 2011. Otherwise, Michigan's not been great, but they've not been down that entire time. They've brought some really good teams, especially under Jim Harbaugh, to that game. And so to win all those consecutive times, Ohio State, that's an impressive streak against really anyone, but in particular, Michigan.
And I would say Michigan is very close to being from okay to much better under Brandon Peters. I think Brandon Peters is the future of that program. I think Jim Harbaugh knows that the quarterback piece has been missing. He's still, as much as I don't like admitting this, he's still recruiting well. He's, still a respectable coach. And it's something that they have just a few small adjustments to make to be a very good football team in a very competitive East Division. So I don't think that they're far away from it. And I think that's why, I don't know, as Ohio State fans, we don't hear as many rumblings about that, because Michigan fans would never concede in front of an Ohio State fan that their coach might not be great. But there are not quite as many rumblings out there about Coach Harbaugh being on the hot seat. Beating your rival is extremely important to both schools. There are bonuses involved for doing such, and both teams have admitted to planning for this game all year long, that it's not just a 1-week rivalry. So I definitely think that there's quite a bit of importance on it. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately for Buckeye fans, but Jim Harbaugh is now 1-4 against his rivals, and it's 1-5. I corrected myself, and I didn't need
6
to.
years, 6 games.
6 years. Thank
or
you.
3 years, 6 games. 3 years, 6 games. Yes.
Thank you. So, it's difficult to say, oh, he's on the hot seat, but he's still making improvements year after year. And I think Brandon Peters is going to be the thing that gets them over that hump.
We talk Ohio State football with Claire Crawford. You can join her and Joe Dexter on their podcast, Oh Hail No. Just go to theozone.net. Talking Buckeyes, Badgers, the Big Ten Championship, and maybe even more on the line. What about Dwayne Haskins?
What about Dwayne Haskins? It was really, we've watched him play throughout the year in kind of the garbage time reps, and for him to have been 4 for 5, right?
6 for 7.
For 7. See, I'm getting corrected all day. I need a tune-up, a Buckeye tune-up. 6 for 7 on the day, and really, we saw him look cool and calm and comfortable in a situation that was very high pressure. We watched him play very loose. Now, granted, they didn't throw the playbook at Dwayne Haskins and expect him to execute. But what I think the difference was, when Dwayne Haskins went in the game, they knew that they needed to use their tailbacks to run the ball, and not just JT Barrett to run the ball, or Dwayne Haskins now running the ball. So, and we've talked about it before, how when Ohio State abandons the use of the tailbacks running the ball, or abandons the run game altogether when they're trying to force other things, then it doesn't turn out in Ohio State's favor. So the fact that Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins were able to really start catching some headwind on a very staunch Michigan defense that was not giving up much up to this game was really impressive, and I think definitely helped open up that pass game for Dwayne Haskins.
Ohio State down when JT Barrett went down 20-14. They had a drive going that was the completion of the JT Barrett started drive. Dwayne Haskins in the game, and they got to a 3rd and I believe 13. And I'm thinking they're out of field goal range just barely. They need a play. If they're thinking conservatively, they're probably going to try to do something with a draw, quarterback draw, bubble screen, something to try to create a little bit of yardage. But they need quite a bit to really get in meaningful, realistic field goal range, considering the Sean Nurenberger's difficulty hitting from long range, although he did hit a 44-yarder. But for him to drop back, for them to trust him, and for him to hit that ridiculous throw where he just laced it between 2 defenders and basically planted it, almost put the football cross imprint into Austin Mack's chest. It was thrown so hard. And Austin Mack took a vicious hit, hung onto the ball for the first down that led to the touchdown that got them to within 21, or they took the lead on that one. I was missing who missed the extra points there. They took the lead at 21-20 after completing that drive. I thought it was a great throw, and then it seemed to really open up the offense, because I know that the Michigan defense probably thinking the same thing. Okay, they're not going to trust him. We're going to see a lot of quarterback runs. We're going to see a lot of protective type plays to try to prevent turnover. And he ripped off that throw. And from there on, no, they didn't shoulder the offense onto him like you just stated, but they let him throw in the situations in which they needed to convert.
And he did absolutely exactly what they needed him to do. And that's a lot to ask at that time out of that guy, and he stepped up. And as Buckeye fans, we want to see JT Barrett succeed. Right now, JT Barrett obviously went down in the game and had arthroscopic surgery this week, and is still cleared to play in the Big Ten championship game. And as Buckeye fans, we want to go forward and send JT out that way and have him healthy and still win. But I think also as fans, we are feeling more comfortable. And I'm hoping that the staff, the Ohio State staff, is feeling more comfortable knowing that Dwayne Haskins can go in a high pressure situation and can really get this offense moving, maybe in a way that JT Barrett can't.
There was a really good question posed to Urban Meyer this week at his Monday news conference, and he didn't necessarily answer it, but I think he respected the question and he understood the reporter's line of thinking, but he just couldn't take all of these circumstances into account because he's not in that situation. But it went along the lines of, are you going to be not just more confident, but more likely to pull the trigger and bring in Haskins if JT is limp? If he's hobbled up, are you more likely to say, okay, we know what we have a little bit more in Dwayne Haskins, therefore JT's not at 100% or even 90%, so we're going to make the move, as opposed to JT has to practically be crawling off the field for us to insert anyone prior to us getting that proof in a big game on the road that Dwayne Haskins is up to the challenge. And Urban didn't want to put himself in a position to be responsible or accountable to any game time decisions, but at the same time, he understood the line of thinking and just said, hey, we're going to have to determine at that point, what's the score, how much time's left in the game, how is our defense playing, how are we moving the ball otherwise, how's the offensive line playing. There are a lot of things to be taken into consideration, but yeah, it's a different decision today than it would have been 10 days ago.
And the only thing that Buckeye fans should be aware of, and I know we're kind of like circling the drain talking about Wisconsin here in the Big Ten championship game.
We'll get to them.
We're meshing the two together right now, right? Wisconsin has the number 2 scoring defense in the country right now. They're averaging 12 points a game. And it's something, first of all, that the Buckeye defense has not been able to do. And second of all, if Haskins does go in as successful as he was against Michigan, we should have a little bit of reservation with him being more of a gunslinger type quarterback and playing a little bit looser than JT, who has historically taken very good care of the football, with the exception of the abomination of the Iowa game. That it's something that Haskins, if let's say he does throw a pick, what his mentality is going to look like after that, if he's going to be able to bounce back, or if he even has to play at all.
Ohio State taking on Wisconsin for the Big Ten championship. These two programs got together a few years ago, and it meant something for Ohio State, not just the win, but the result. We'll never know for sure, but 59-0 may have been enough to vault them into the playoffs, and not just merely a field goal win. It may have taken that kind of score to get them into the playoffs. And of course, the rest is history. Here we are 3 years later. We've got a Wisconsin team that's undefeated, but still maybe the least respected team in college football, taking on Ohio State as a 5-point favorite, are the Buckeyes at 10-2. So Wisconsin would never have played the roughest schedule in the country, regardless of how well the teams played at the end of the schedule. But they did face some stiffer competition in Northwestern, Iowa, Michigan, and proved themselves up to the challenge, defeating all those teams rather handily. The Michigan game was a good game midway through the third quarter, and then Wisconsin took it from there. Your thoughts about the Badgers? It seems to be pretty much the framework, stereotypical Wisconsin team. Huge offensive line, stud running back, quarterback, questionable, and maybe some issues on the perimeter and trying to stretch the defense, but their defense, rock solid, technique to the hilt, gamers, scrappers, don't miss tackles, don't miss assignments, don't blow coverages. They do it all pretty much textbook.
They are very textbook. They're the number one defense against the run. They're the number one total defense in the country. I mentioned before that they're the number two scoring defense in the country. So not only are they rock solid and disciplined, but they can be aggressive as well. The good news is, as you alluded to with Mr. Hornibrook, that Ohio State defense may also have some similar opportunities, like I mentioned about the Wisconsin defense. Usually if he's flushed out of the pocket and trying to force a situation, it's an opportunity for a very aggressive kind of bend don't break Greg Schiano defense to possibly capitalize on some of Hornibrook's mistake. But like you mentioned, that offensive line of theirs is huge, gigantic. I like just corn-fed Wisconsin boys, and it's really, really impressive. So as marginal as Hornibrook is, he definitely has the right protection around him, and he's got a very, very good tailback to dump it off to as well.
Yeah, Alex Hornibrook was a part-time starter last year, played most of the meaningful minutes down the stretch as Wisconsin won all its games except for two very close games against Michigan, one score on the road, and Ohio State in overtime before going on to the Cotton Bowl and winning over Western Michigan. So Wisconsin, lightly respected and regarded because they're not going to just wow anyone with their speed and talent, but this team, this program, is a mainstay in college football, top 10 to 15 each and every year. Alex Hornibrook, 64% passer, 21 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. The stats are a little bit glossier than the actual performance. He can deliver the ball, but he just doesn't do it as consistently enough. The last game that I saw pretty much start to finish was the Michigan game. And when they put the game away in the fourth quarter and scored 2 touchdowns to win it 24-10, he threw some laser shots and made some really good throws. Now, overall, 9 for 19 against Michigan. That's pretty much what he does against the better teams. It's about 20%, and Wisconsin does not want to throw the ball more than 20 times. If you look at any of the Big Ten games this year that have been competitive, boy, he's throwing the ball against the Big Ten, Claire, 20, 17, 18, 24, 19, 20, 18, 19, 19. I think they want to throw the ball 19 times is what Wisconsin wants to do. If they've got 19 throws in the third quarter, they say, we're not throwing the ball anymore. That's enough.
So it's safe to say if the Buckeyes shut down Jonathan Taylor, then they would definitely have a fighting chance. He's got 1,800 yards on the season. He got to the 1,000-yard mark 7 games in. And again, the reason that Wisconsin is not as respected at 12-0 is because they have an inferior schedule. But I don't care who you are, 1,800 yards on the season was still a game to go for them, and maybe more than it really is extremely impressive.
So let's look at the good defenses against Jonathan Taylor. Most recently against Michigan in Madison, 19 carries for $132. That's 6.9 per carry. Against Iowa, 29 carries for $157. Nothing wrong with that at 5.5 yards per carry. Those are the two best defenses he's faced. Northwestern, a scrappy bunch. They're a good defense, but really not that talented. 19 carries for 80 yards, and he's pretty much ripped up everybody else to shreds. 249 on Nebraska, 219 on Purdue. Yes, if Wisconsin was a little bit more respected and he would have had maybe a showcase game in here, plus he would have had the national pub and limelight going into the season, he would have Heisman consideration type numbers with 1,800 yards, as you state, 7 yards per carry and 13 touchdowns. So yeah, Wisconsin, they're a really good football team. I hate that they don't get much respect. They're sitting at number 4, and they did schedule BYU, and BYU decided to be horrible this year. They usually win their 8 or 9, 10 games at times, but really bad football team that Wisconsin took apart. So they've really not proven anything outside the Big Ten, or even aside from the Michigan win, the Big Ten Western Division, which has its critics as well. So what do you think about this playoff situation, Claire, with the Buckeyes, considering that The Clemson-Miami winner is in from the ACC. The Georgia-Auburn winner in from the SEC. Oklahoma, if they take care of business against TCU, in from the Big 12. So we have a number of possibilities and quite the argument between, where does this sound familiar? The one-loss team that didn't win their conference versus the two-loss team that did win their conference. So try to take off your scarlet and gray. Just if that's possible, take off your scarlet and gray. Do you think Ohio State should make the playoff if they win the Big Ten championship? And the other question would be, try to put yourself in the committee's shoes. And do you think they will select Ohio State against, let's say, Alabama being that one-loss non-conference champ that poses the biggest threat?
So I will do my best to take off my scarlet and gray. The playoff system was designed to be the four best teams on the field, and it's difficult for me, even as an Ohio State fan, to say that the 55-point, that loss at Iowa, even though it was a tough road environment and a conference foe, it's hard to say that Ohio State is one of those four best teams. I'm curious as this weekend what they will do against Wisconsin. If it is one of those situations, 4 out of the last 5 of these games have been decided by 7 points or less. Ohio State has won all 5 of those, and we know what that 5th one is that 59-0 Big Ten championship in 2014. But it's always been a scrappy game. And unless Ohio State has another blowout with Wisconsin, it's really tough for the committee to justify this Power 5 conference championship winner being in. And there are other conference championship winners that are going to be left out, I believe. And it's to make room, I think, for a one-loss Bama, in my opinion. I think Nick Saban has a very loud megaphone, and they lost to a very good Auburn team. And I can't be a hypocrite as an Ohio State fan. Them going in and having the one loss and then end up getting to go to the playoff and getting embarrassed by Clemson is not something that we ever wanted to see. I don't know how much I respect who Alabama has played so far, but other than obviously Auburn, who they lost to. But it's difficult for me to say, no, absolutely not, when Ohio State clearly was able to do it last year.
My stance is not going to be hypocritical because at this point last year, after the Big Ten championship game, I tried to be as clear as possible, and a lot of people still misread it, that I thought Ohio State was one of the 4 best teams in the country. However, I would not have selected them to go to the playoff because they did not win the Big Ten championship. Those are 2 different arguments for me. I know that the selection committee is charged with selecting the 4 best teams. And so since that is the assignment, that's what they need to do. I would approach it differently. I would look at resume. I don't believe that Wisconsin, I think they're a very good team. I think they're undervalued. I think they're one of the 8 or 10 best teams in the country. I don't think they're one of the 4 best teams in the country. And unless they show us something completely that we didn't expect against Ohio State, and it's 59-0 the other way, I don't think there's anything that Wisconsin can do on Saturday to prove to anyone, including myself, that they're one of the 4 best teams in the country. But in my book, they will have earned the right to be selected among the 4 teams by going undefeated, winning one of the best conferences in the country. So this year, the case I will make for Ohio State is that, yes, losing at Iowa, and I hate a system that forces us to evaluate losses and wins and not just take it as a win, a loss, but it's a beauty contest, and it has to be because there's not enough spots. So you have to evaluate the wins and losses. So going to Iowa losing 55-24 is different than if the Buckeyes would have went up there and lost 20-17 on a last-second field goal. However, what's not being calculated in this argument, and this is the game that's brought up constantly by Alabama supporters and Ohio State detractors. You went to Iowa, you gave up 55 points. I heard somebody say this week on a national show, they said, the reason I would put Alabama in the playoff over Ohio State is I cannot imagine Alabama going to Iowa and giving up 55 points. I totally understand that. I can't imagine it either, but I was all over Twitter going crazy saying, since when do we select playoff teams on what we can imagine happening?
Right. You can't.
To my point, I said, and it took a little interpretation and definition to explain this tweet, but I said, and you would have believed or imagined Alabama losing to Pitt last year? And my immediate response I got from a number of people was, Alabama didn't lose to Pitt last year. You don't know what you're talking about. You know what? I do know what I'm talking about, because you're comparing Alabama and Ohio State, two teams that could be meeting in the playoff or that you're comparing them against. Last year, Alabama lost a national championship game to a team that lost to Pitt, that no one would have ever thought could have lost to Pitt, but they won the national championship.
And Pitt put another wrench in the plans this year with Miami.
Yeah, possibly. And the other thing is, let's for a second focus on wins and not losses. Who as good as Michigan State has Alabama beaten 48-3?
They don't have that. They don't.
Yeah, they don't have that.
I think the committee has shown directly after the Clemson loss to Syracuse that they are not devaluing a team as harshly for a quality of win or loss. They want to see, quality of loss. They want to see a quality of win, like who have you beat? So that's, I think, your point to not having Alabama in, not just only that they're not going to a conference championship, but they don't have that signature win. They don't have a team of that caliber that they have absolutely dominated. And Clemson, their resume keeps getting better and better over the year, which I kind of struggled with supporting. And I was not excited about them being in the top four after that loss to Syracuse, but it's starting to look better. And I agree. I think that would be the situation, but I don't know that the committee is going to agree with me on that.
So Ohio State beat Penn State. I don't think there's any question that Penn State is better than any game Alabama has won this year. That is the best win between the two teams. In addition to that, while we are rating losses and the disparity of score in losses, Ohio State at Iowa, we need to do the same, therefore, in the wins. So my Michigan State example is basically Michigan State's on that same plane, very close to LSU and Mississippi State. Those are Alabama's two best wins, Mississippi State and LSU. Alabama squeaked by Mississippi State, and they beat LSU, not handily. It was a close game. It turned out to be a two-score game at the end, 24-10. Ohio State annihilated Michigan State. So that could almost counterbalance the other argument of the losses, in my book.
And, whether we like to admit it or not, it does come down to whose teams Heine's fill seats. And, it's not like we like to think about that, but certainly Ohio State and the blue bloods of college football do that. I think it would be a different conversation if it was somebody like, maybe like a TCU or a Boise State or Western Michigan that was knocking on that door. But that certainly complicates things a little bit.
Yeah, you got two blue bloods matched up in this one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not an Ohio State versus TCU and Baylor situation again this time around. All right. Do you have a good feel for this one?
I do. I think the Buckeye offense is better than that Wisconsin offense, and the Buckeye defense as long as they stay disciplined. We've seen when special teams is clicking on all cylinders, that Buckeye defense, the pressure is taken off them a little bit more. If they can execute that, then I think the Buckeyes, the Buckeyes will roll. As confident as I can be. I'm always a nervous wreck. I'm gonna have more grays.
Do you and Joe make predictions?
Am I gonna
Are
make
you
a
and Joe
prediction?
in the prediction business?
Um,
You don't need to make a prediction. I was just wondering if you were in the prediction business.
I am.
But this is too early to make one.
Am I open for business? If I'm in the
You don't need to debut your prediction on my show. You can do that wherever you'd like.
I can certainly predict it here. I don't have any other plans to predict it anywhere else. I would see another defensive battle. I think the score is going to be similar to what we saw in Michigan, everyone being healthy. Although it's a neutral site, I will say Ohio State 24, Wisconsin 10.
Okay. Wow. Laying the defense on them.
Yeah. Guys are averaging
really
over 30 points per game, and they're the number 5 scoring defense in the country right now. I think they're going to be able, even though this Wisconsin defense is tough, I think Ohio State's defense is deeper.
Okay. My prediction is that Ohio State wins 58-0, and the College Football Playoff Committee says that's not good enough. We weren't impressed enough. It was only 58-0. Sorry, you're out.
No, it's got to be 60. It's got to be one more point than last time.
All right. It's fun to argue, and it's one of the reasons I do this, because I love college football and I love the debate and the possibilities and the scenarios, but it's also aggravating because I would have an objective system and there would be no argument because people wouldn't decide it.
Yeah,
but then we'd have less to talk about.
Exactly. If we have computers taking over, then they don't pass the eye test, and those that do pass the eye test are not up to the stats. And in the meantime, we'll stick with this iteration. But like you and I have talked about many times, we've made the argument for a better system.
During the stale season of college football, sometime in mid-May or June, I'm going to unveil my college football playoff selection process, which I've already done years ago, but I'll do it for Claire. And it's a good thing she's got the couch handy there. I'm sure that she'll be like sprawled out by the time I'm done explaining how I would set it up.
Therapy.
No, not therapy, just sheer boredom. All right, Claire Crawford at theozone.net. You got to join her right there, Buckeye fans, for the very best in Ohio State football coverage, analysis, just fun talk between her and Joe Dexter on Oh Hail No. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel for college football analysis from, you're stuck with me most of the time, but other people like, that's why I have these contributors on as well, Claire included, and she's done a great job during Ohio State's football season, which can include at least 2 more games, maybe 3. We shall see. Claire, we appreciate it. Enjoy the Big Ten championship game.
Thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully I will enjoy it, and I appreciate it again.